Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. It's a meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education. And just as a reminder, we are meeting here at the Partham School Auditorium, but per the governor's executive order in March, we are having board members able to participate remotely. So as we start, I would like to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So welcome, first of all, to folks here in the room and folks watching through Facebook Live. We're excited. This is the first meeting we have now that school's in session, so really looking forward to hearing how the school year has started for our students, our staff, our families, so really excited about that. So again, today we'll be hearing from the superintendent an update just on the reopening plan and in phase one update, and then we'll have the report of the chair as well outlining the superintendent's evaluation update for the 19-20 school year. So for public comment, we have two people who have signed up for in-person public comment. So the first one is Natalie Ryan. If you can please come to the podium. Okay, so we have Johanna Rodriguez. Okay, so she can, that's fine.
Thank you for having me here. Dear Lawrence Alliance for Education, we fought both tooth and nail and are now finally able to say that some educators who have doctor's notes attesting that they may die without accommodations may work safely. We protested and called politicians and finally are able to care for our children without losing our homes. Some of you would tell us that that's a win. It's not. Those are basic human rights, and it is shameful that we ever needed to convince you that we deserve them. It's important to remember that just because some people are getting accommodations, that doesn't mean the district has done its job. People who aren't high risk deserve to be safe. People without high risk, people at their address, deserve to be safe. And people without children deserve to be safe. Many districts understand this, Boston for one. Boston teachers have a lower risk of bringing COVID-19 home in Boston than Lawrence teachers do. Boston teachers were given the autonomy to choose where they work best. Boston students will be taught by teachers who feel safe, valued, and supported. For this reason alone, Boston students will receive a much higher quality education than our Lawrence students. It's almost as if someone has the motivation to set us up to fail. Maybe so they can rush people into unsafe buildings more quickly. An unintended consequence of this sheer abuse of Lawrence educators is that we have bonded in a way that I've never seen before. Educators from every building in the district have come together to share our frustrations and support for each other. Since it's clear that we won't be getting that from our district, in a time where we have felt powerless and cast aside, we have discovered a burning fire that is growing stronger each day, that we are told that we can't be trusted to make the best decisions for ourselves and our students. We have picked up on every subtle attempt to create divides between educators and between educators and the community, and the opposite has happened. We have found strength among ourselves and each other. Those of us who have been here long enough are finding validation in the loss we have felt over our schools that have been destroyed, over our talented colleagues who have been driven out, and over our students in the many ways that are continually exploited, including and especially by the receivership. The decision to mandate people into buildings before it is safe to do so has woken all of us up to a few truths. And I now call my colleague Natalie.
Thank you. Natalie Ryan.
Thank you. Number one, LPS has no reason to want to retain teachers. We've all heard the spiel about how we need to focus on retaining staff, but it's so clear now why we are so bad at it. Teachers without professional status are far more vulnerable and less likely to fight the receivership. We consistently have a significant amount of new teachers, more than most districts, and for that reason we are unlikely to ever have the majority on board to advocate in a meaningful way. We have woken up to this now. We see very clearly that you are intentionally driving us out. This is systemic oppression, and this is the nature of the receivership. Number 2, Black and brown lives, futures, and dreams do not matter to LPS. Our students are tools to get ahead. Our educators are pawns. We are all stepping stones. This is why we are in the unimaginable position of realizing that the people who make the decisions don't care about the lives or health of ourselves, our students, or our communities. In the spring of 2020, the country woke up to a truth that many of us have long known, that Black and brown lives matter, and that we live within systems that are created to oppress, exploit, and profit off of them. The receivership of Lawrence is one of many examples of such oppression. Our students deserve a healthy community whose struggles in a pandemic are not exacerbated by forcing people into buildings when they are able to work from home. They deserve to learn from teachers without a mask. They deserve healthy, happy, experienced educators who look forward to seeing them every day and who feel valued and supported and feel safe enough to focus on their teaching and the students in front of them. Our students deserve educators who aren't so distracted by their own stress and fear that they are requiring medical attention for stress-induced ailments during a pandemic. Do you know that stress lowers the immune system? LPS pushes social-emotional learning as an initiative, but you don't care about the emotional and mental health of your educators. We've woken up, more of us than you know, and we've come together. Some of the traits of longtime educators in Lawrence are that we are fighters, we are survivors, and we are fiercely talented, just like our students. This is the straw that is breaking the camel's back, and after many years of abuse and powerlessness and loss through the receivership, now you have put our literal lives on the line and stared us in the face as you told us they don't matter. We've had enough. We're using our teacher voices, and we will make you listen. Prove us wrong.
Thank you both for your comments. Thank you. At this time, I will turn it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you so much. I have a few updates since we last met about reopening. I've had the opportunity to visit several buildings alongside with LTU President Kim Barry, and it's been a joy to see teachers in classrooms greeting their children remotely, and it's been extremely satisfying to see kids really excited to reconnect with their teachers. The teachers have done an incredible job at managing the remote learning, and we feel really proud of our principals and administrators who have supported that effort. I'll start with facilities. So a few weeks back, we spoke about our house doctor, CBI, to do a ventilation assessment. That is for phase 1. To date, CBI consultants have completed the first phase of the ventilation assessment. 7 buildings have been completed. That report is now pending, and we hope that next week we will have the completion of that report for us to further analyze. In the interim, window screens are being replaced, Bach fans are being placed, and plexiglass shields are also in place. Next, we've added additional meal site distributions. We've also extended the hours. Administrators and teachers noted that the schedule needed to be adjusted so that we can accommodate our high schoolers and other learners. So now the hours for lunch distribution, lunch and breakfast distribution are 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Arlington School, Hennessy, LAE, Partham, Frost, the Lawler, the North Common, South Lawrence East, Gilmet, Lawrence High School, and Oliver Partnership and Weatherby are now sites for meals distribution. With respect to our communication, we have been We have shared information with our families in Univision, Telemundo, Radio 10209, Fortaleciendo la Familia, and we've done those a couple of times now, specifically with Univision and Telemundo since we've last met with you all. I don't know if you wanted to pause there with any questions, because then I want to get into more meatier things like human resources and the request for remote, and then attendance and enrollment.
Are there questions, or if not, I could?
I have one question. Have we considered, or are we implementing, in terms of the meal distribution, is there a way that families can pick up like multiple meals for the week in one day so they don't have to go every day to the school to get it?
They can.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do we, I'll take a question. So do we have a sense of, for the meals, just like how many meals are being distributed and, just things like that? Or how are we tracking that maybe more broadly?
Sure, I can get that number from Carol.
Great, thank you. Okay, I would say maybe then let's just go ahead and go on, and then we can open it up for board member questions.
Great. So next, I want to share with you the number of remote work requests as of this morning. The total number request is 569, of which 341 requests have been approved, 36 have been denied, and 192 requests are pending. Of those 192 that are still pending, 170 are of the LTU, para, and clerical union, and 22 are all other unions and non-union employees.
Can you run them down again?
Sure. 569 total request, 341 approved, 36 denied, 192 requests pending. Sure.
192.
Sure, 192 requests pending.
No, the last statement you made after the 192.
Oh,
Regarding the staff.
Sure, the breakdown of the 192? Yeah, the breakdown of the 192 is 170 in the LTU. That includes paraprofessionals and clerks. And then the 22 other remaining are for other unions and non-union employees. The process remains the same for the remote request, which is the staff member fills out the forms and pertaining documentation, and then HR reviews every request. The other thing I wanted to note is that those that are remaining receive message that their request is approved until it is further reviewed. So those 192 that are pending all have been granted remote work until their request is reviewed.
Are we going to wait till the end to ask questions, or can we?
Why don't we pause here and ask some questions, because it seems like an important topic. I'm going to try this. If you have a question, let me know instead of going through, and then let's see. So
I do.
yeah. No, I'm just saying for other board members, instead of going through everybody's name. So we'll just start with you, Julio.
Okay. Yeah, the question is on the 36 denials. Can you tell us why they've been denied?
They're very specific with respect to the information, so I do not have the specific as to why the 36 were denied. I can give you broader examples without disclosing too much.
Mm-hmm.
So examples include the staff member not having the proper documentation and/or sending documentation. Here's an example. This is a recent one where they had screenshotted their medications, which included a variety of things that HR obviously is not qualified to say, what's going on here. and asking them to resubmit doctor's documentation, for example.
So if they provide additional documentation, even though it has been denied, they might still be granted?
Sure, those are revisited, and we have revisited many of those in that example.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pat, because you're on the computer, I'm going to ask if you have any questions right now.
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, other board members?
I'm just wondering, of the 192 that are pending, if most of them are, since most of them are paras and clerks, are you sort of following a separate process with the paras and clerks and others? Are you sort of segregating out the teacher requests versus the para? So are the 341 that have been approved, are those all teachers, or are there paras in there too? Because otherwise it just seems like paras are overrepresented in the pending requests.
So the 170 are in the LTU, which include paras and clerks and teachers. I should have been
Okay,
clear about that.
I'm sorry.
Also includes teachers. So the LTU represents paras, clerks, and teachers.
Okay. So the 341 that were approved are not in the LTU?
They are.
They are as
Yep,
well?
they could be, and they can also be non-union members.
see.
They're all staff, all staff.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. All right, and then what's the appeal process if somebody is denied?
HR has a system where they they can then share with the staff member what additional documentation, if that's the example, they would need.
Okay. All right. And then, I guess this is a more qualitative question, and it might not be, you might not be able to answer it at this point in the semester, but I would just be interested, at the end of the, at the end of the semester in, understanding, like, how that worked out, like, what was the teacher experience, what was the student and class experience, and, in fact, if there was any kind of qualitative difference between having a teacher teach in the classroom versus teach from the classroom versus teach from the home, right? So it's not that I'm not asking you to create a big evaluation process around that, but I feel like it would be good to just sort of look at and ask that, just because we've spent weeks having like large and heated discussions around this, and I think that many of us feel that we want to be focusing on how effective is the learning being, and are students engaged and present, and what are the challenges with that, and how can we do that better and deliver that better. And so, I'll just be curious to know, because if it turns out that, it's working out fine, and, there is not a whole lot of difference, then maybe we won't have to have this fight again. Which is more of a comment than a question,
Yep.
but I'm done. Thanks.
Good. Julio?
I just want to add to what Jess just said. What is, and I know you've given us this total, what is the total staff?
Just over 2,000, 2,300.
2,300, right? So what happens with the other staff members? They have also been provided with the opportunity to request to teach remotely, or they have not chosen to do that?
All staff members have the same opportunity.
Where do they stand at this point? Because we're still hearing from some of the staff members saying that they feel uncomfortable about coming in, and they'd rather teach remotely. So So my question is how those staff people that have not requested, are they coming into the buildings and they have no problems coming in?
I haven't heard that. I think that from the folks who have made the request, as I mentioned, they have been granted it temporarily if yours still haven't been processed, and those who have been approved are at home.
And how much longer will we have for teachers to request this accommodation?
We don't have a deadline because we believe that things change in people's lives. You know, one day you could be well, another day you have a family member who's not. Your life changes.
All right, thank you.
I do have one more question around this. So it looks like about, I was just doing a rough calculation, about 25% of teachers, right, 569 out of 2,300, have made the request for remote accommodation. I know that in a month or so, give or take, that we are going to be having that high needs students returning on a hybrid model. Are you expecting, I mean, that sounds like 75% of teachers are willing to come on site right now when there's no kids in the classroom, like more or less, and as you said, that may change. So it does seem like, I would imagine that maybe some subset of those teachers are comfortable coming in to teach remotely from the classroom, but might have a different feeling about having kids in there and being in there with kids. So are we expecting to see like some surge in a request for remote assignments, or are we feeling at this point like we're going to have enough staff coverage to effectively implement the hybrid model when that starts to happen for high-need students?
It's a great question. Will we have enough staff for high needs? I can't answer yet. The other data point here is how many families will choose that option so we can match. But just to be clear, the 569 and the 349 are all staff members, not
Okay,
just
not
teachers,
just
right? So
teachers.
remember, LTU
Okay.
includes clerks and paras.
Yep.
They've also been granted remote work assignments.
I see.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right,
341.
yeah. Okay.
Just, do you mind, I ask some questions then, just on this
Yeah.
as well? So, first of all, I mean, from the board perspective, I just want to acknowledge, I know the hard work that the LTU leadership engaged in with the district in terms of trying to find and eventually landed an MOU. And I think that was really, really important. And I know that, I think it was a couple of Fridays ago, it was even a long night just trying to get, sort of that, just the language and the framework. So I was, just really pleased and just thankful that, the LTU leadership working with the district were able to come up to this MOU, or with the MOU rather, that was then ratified by the membership. And I particularly liked that in the section for accommodations, I mean, it was very clear the different categories and groupings, and that one of them included all other staff. So even if you, had the, I think the first one was if you had health issues or someone you live with, and then there was sort of other criteria. But if I remember correctly, the language in that the last criteria did say all other staff. So for me, that was important because that meant all staff was eligible to apply and be considered. And I also know that it will be important once we are in a position where we can start thinking about bringing back high-need students, that the MOU is clear that we then have to assess how many kids will actually come back, how many staff members will we need, and then, that'll have to be adjusted, based on how many students actually come back. And I also, again, just to underscore that this is not a process that there's a final date that teachers, from what I'm understanding and just kind of confirming, can apply for the accommodation. There's no deadline, as you've said, like right now that they have to meet it, like it's still open. And again, I would encourage teachers who feel like they want that and need that to know that it's still available and they can apply for it. So just want to say that publicly as well. But All right, so I'm going to say, let's move on. I know you have other updates, and then we can have other questions.
Great. So next, I want to talk about attendance. When we last met, we finished the survey week right before school started at 89%, of which we believe, after pushing it a few times, created a few duplicates. And by a few, it was hard for us to say. Some families felt like they had filled it out and refilled it out again for several of their students. Enrollment as of 9/21 is 13,479. Just to give you perspective, last year, as of October 1, that enrollment number was 13,785, so about 200 off, but we're still registering new families every day. Attendance is as follows. On the first day of the 16th, which was last Wednesday, we had a 79% attendance. On the Thursday, it was 85%. On Friday, it was 87%. On the 21st, 88%. And now on the 22nd, 91%. We have a few schools that are averaging above 95%. We have a few schools in the 70%. Let's see what other is to note. And then we have 5 schools at 100%. Some things we've discovered while we spoke to teachers and our administrators. We have many kids who are in a different state and continue to be enrolled with us. Examples of that include students in Texas, Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, New York City, and the list goes on and on. We have some challenges with Preschool Model, which is, as a reminder, AM and PM. That's quite challenging for our families who have to make a choice between sending their student full-time to daycare versus checking their student in and out of the remote learning session. One of the things that we learned is that daycare providers, as you can imagine, are unable to support our preschool and kindergartners because they have other children to tend to. We do get support from our larger partners. They've been exceptional at helping us log our students in particular TCG, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. They've been exemplary at helping us ensure that our kids are connected. Our staff are doing amazing at finding out where our students are. We have examples of schools and staff who have done home visits, of course, the calls, and learning more about why our students have not logged in so far. We have a few kids that have continued to be enrolled and have new phone numbers and new addresses, and so those are a little bit trickier, so we've enlisted the help of our attendance officers and central office leaders. We're going to be knocking on doors of our local community members to help us find out why those students have not logged on. Furthermore, we have families who have disclosed that they have students who are remotely and they don't want to lose their spot here because at some point they intend to have their student return to us. So now we're in this position of perhaps unenrolling some of those students because wherever they are, they're unable to log on.
We open up, for questions now. Mayor?
Can you just run down the attendance numbers again?
Sure. 916-79, 917-85, 918-87, 921-88, 922-91.
Can you just go over what I would have to do as a student to be considered in attendance? Like, what qualifies me to be in attendance?
Sure, great question. So the attendance guidelines have also changed, so every single period, especially for middle schoolers and high schoolers, counts as attendance. For our youngest students, attendance is a little different because they have the same teacher throughout their day. So every time a student logs in as a middle schooler or high schooler and doesn't show up, they cannot be counted as present. And we have quite a bit of that happening, as you can imagine, with our high schoolers right now.
They log in and then just don't show up to the screen.
They log in for their first class, but don't show up to the next class, and that we cannot count. They can only count attendance once the student is present in that one class. Every single class counts as attendance.
So the 79% is an average across not just days, but classes?
Correct.
That people are coming to?
Correct. Every single
Correct.
class counts.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, a follow-up to that,
Yeah.
So we had an attendance of 91%, and we tracked 89 with duplicates, finding the information of whether or not they had a device, or Wi-Fi, or food, but there's some duplicates in that, so we could probably say something like 87 or 85%. I mean, you can call it however you like. My concern is that someplace between, depending on how much of a duplication factor you put into it, between 1,200 and 1,400 students, we don't know whether or not they have a device, or Wi-Fi, or food. Am I extrapolating that too far?
I think what the survey gave us was the initial temperature check of what families and students needed. What we also learned is that families who did not respond to the survey assessment needs because they didn't have those needs. I said they didn't fill it out because I didn't need any of those things, so it didn't apply to me.
But Mayor, can I follow up with a question on that?
Yeah.
So, again, this is an important point. I just want to make sure then. So the survey yielded the 80 whatever percent, 89, I know. But since then, based on the comment, Superintendent, I'm understanding, you've connected with some of the families that weren't accounted for in the survey, and they've told you things like what you just said. So I think at the end of the day, I think that's also what I'm interested. I know the survey yielded, I don't know, between 85, 89, depending on the duplicates. But do you feel confident that then you've been able to reach those other kids that weren't captured by the survey and know why either they didn't complete the survey or, more importantly, where they're at with needs for food, technology, Wi-Fi?
Yes, what we've learned is that the students who are not showing up, more importantly for us, is students who we have now in front of us, what we call in front of us, based on the attendance. There's a variety of reasons, including high schoolers who now have to work. That's another reason that we learned. We have high schoolers who are now working full-time for, obvious reasons, a family member. Now they're needed as a breadwinner in the family, and so logging on is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly and more interesting is the number of students who are still enrolled with us, but not in the state. And then this issue of our preschool and kindergartners. So it's a combination of factors.
I mean, even if you want to be as generous as you want about the matter, someplace between 500 and 1,000 students, we don't know what's going on with them. And on a good day, that's a little less because you had a 91% attendance record. I don't know if that's 91% on 13.4 or 91% on a different number. But I think that I don't think that, at least from what you told me tonight, and I can only base it on what you told me tonight, I don't think we have a firm grasp on where our kids are. And I say we because this is an enterprise of all of us, and that worries me the most. Because those kids who are not accounted for aren't the kids who are going to have everything in the world for them. They're going to be the kids who have the most support. I'm surprised that DESE doesn't make us post our attendance records online so that everybody can see what we're talking about. And these are things that we didn't want to get temperature checks on. We wanted to know exactly what families needed or didn't need. This is a problem, and I know that people don't think it's a problem for funding right now, because what would the state do? The state would stop funding Lawrence? I think that that absolutely is down the pipe if we don't do these things correctly. And I worry that we don't know how many kids still don't have a device, how many kids don't have Wi-Fi, and how many kids need food. And then just move on to the business of teaching and learning and getting attendance rates as high as 91%. I still think that there's kids being forgotten. What do we do? Because when I said that we should try to figure out those 3 pieces of information, I wasn't trying to get a temperature check. I was trying to know exactly for every one of the students that we have what the need is, because I was one of those kids that my mom worked, and if no one checked in on us, we would be there, if my mom would leave us at home. And I could get over and not, if I didn't have caring teachers, I could get over and not go to school. So I want to plan for the 500 or whatever you want to call it, the forgotten kids or the missing kids. I worry about that more than anything else. We know every window that's broken in this community, in every school building. Every window is accounted for. Every bubbler is accounted for. Every sink is accounted for. I don't think it's much to ask that we account for every kid. And it doesn't worry me like, it scares me what's happening to these kids. So I don't know how we get a report on what we're gonna do with the final, whatever number I'll track the number you want, Madam Superintendent. You tell us what the number is. But I can't continue to go on, not knowing what the real number is, because I think that would be negligent on my part. How do we get there? To a number and to a plan for that number? That's the question.
Are you saying that the numbers I've shared with you are not correct?
I'm saying that if the numbers that you're sharing me are correct, we have unaccounted for children.
So what I shared was that we do know where our students are, and I gave you examples of where they are and what the issues are, including that there are students who are still enrolled in our district and are now living somewhere else, including students who are younger, are in daycare or in the care of someone else who's unable to assist them with logging on, including students who have to work full-time and are struggling to log on. We know where our kids are.
So we accounted for 569 total applications for accommodations. And you saw the gray areas and the different variations of what that total application process is. And that's 569, we had 341 approvals, 30. That's a type of level of details I'd like to see before I don't want anecdotal information. I want actual information on 10 of these people are in the Dominican Republic, 100 of them are in New York. It's granular information that will help me sleep at night knowing that the district is not forgetting about some kids who would normally otherwise have shown up to school. And that, to me, and I know this is not what the teachers want to hear, is the biggest, most important thing that we have to figure out. Because without the kids, there's no schools. So, I'm glad that we have everybody situated with whether or not they can work from home. I'm glad that we figured out, the facilities. But this is the biggest blind spot we have, and I'm not challenging the number. What I'm saying to you is what I'm hearing shows that there's a gap. And frankly, if I had like a spreadsheet with the numbers broken out by the things that you're talking about, maybe I would have a different perspective on it. But all I'm hearing is, we have 91% attendance, I think on 13,479 students. I'm not even going to worry about the 300 difference between last year and this year. That seems like attrition due to all the craziness. But I worry that we don't have these kids in hand. I don't think my tune has changed. So how do we figure out what the number of kids we don't have in hand and how we get those kids?
Right.
Ventura, may I ask a question?
I'd
Mary,
like for my question to be answered.
Just one second, Pat, sorry. Would you like a response?
Yeah, I think the question is now, what I heard you say just recently is that you want a breakdown of how many kids are in the DR in another state and how many kids are in daycare and so on. Okay. I don't have that information this evening.
No, I don't really, those things are actually not as important as the number of kids of the 13,479 that we have no information on as for whether or not they have a device, Wi-Fi, or food. That's the number I want to know for, because I think that's part of our duty is to figure out those kids that we say are enrolled actually have the capacity to log on. And I know there's going to be problems. Babysitter problems, that's a clear one that's coming up. But if we don't know that they have the most basic problems fixed, which is a device, Wi-Fi, and food, I think it's hard for us to say that we got school open for everybody. So
Again,
the detail about, just the number of people we don't have in hand.
We see it differently. I do think we know where they are. I think the teachers are doing an exceptional job at finding out where exactly all their kids are. And so I'm happy to ask every single one of them details about every single kid they've connected who is still not logged on.
So Ventura, after Pat.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Ventura?
Go ahead, Pat, sorry.
I just have a question, Superintendent. The attendance figures that you quoted for the past 5 or 6 days, what is the participation rate? So on the first day of school, we accounted for 79% of the kids attending. But what is the participation rate that day? How many kids actually participated in instruction?
So each time the student is in a class, that counts as attendance/participation.
So if I was to follow these numbers through, today's figure of 91% attendance, it was 91% of the kids that participated in instruction today.
Correct.
And could you just restate what you said about the high school as far as the kids logging in?
Sure, each class at the high school counts for attendance. They do not get credit if they showed up for first period and then missed the last period. They don't get credit for that last period.
Okay. So do you have a number as to how many kids we haven't contacted? Or we haven't reached, is it 1,000? Is it 1,500? Do you know?
Yeah, I think that's the same question that Mayor Rivera had.
Yeah, I had a little problem hearing him.
Oh, okay, sorry. I think that's the same question that he had, which is, what is that number and the specifics of why they're not attending? Is that your question as well?
Yes, and as a follow-up to that, is DESE still holding to that 10-day window where we have to find the kids?
Well, so that's what I was saying earlier, that we may be forced to unenroll some kids, specifically those students that I mentioned who are now in another state, in another country, who, for whatever reason, cannot log on. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to unenroll our students. But we do have a 10-day window. If you're not showing up and you're saying, I'm not showing up to school, then they have to unenroll from us, and we have to be certain they've enrolled somewhere else.
Isn't that the only way you can unenroll them? They have to be enrolled in another district, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Jess?
Okay. I mean, this is blowing my mind. Like, so even when we have a 91% attendance rate, right? If I'm just going off the 13,479 number, that means we have 1,213 kids who are not attending school. And, I mean, I do agree with the mayor that it would be helpful to have some more complete data on how many of those are in the different categories that you described. But my larger concern is that based on some of the situations that you're describing, which are also situations that I'm hearing about through our community network and membership, like, this is a huge community problem. This is not something that the schools can solve alone. Like, if you have a situation where it's a family and the parents lost their job because of COVID lockdown situations, and the teenager is the only one who can get a job to support the family because maybe the parent has, English language constraints or so on, then, what's the choice for that family? Like, this LPS cannot solve that problem, or it can't solve it alone. If you have families that are doubled and tripled up in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, and, kids are not logging on because there's not enough devices, or when they do log on, there's not, the ability to concentrate or pay attention. like number one thing this is telling me is that everything that we can do to safely return to in-person learning has to be an absolute priority for us, because that is the only way that we're going to avoid a complete educational disaster for these kids. And that's not just for the 1,200 kids who can't attend all the time. It's also, and I'm just like speaking to my own anecdotal experience as a parent, right? Like, I have been listening all week to what's going on, and his teachers are working super hard to get everything going, and they have curriculum in place and lesson plans and assignments and so on. But every class is taking twice as long as it ideally would in person, because they have to stop and troubleshoot Zoom problems for one of the students, or there's an English language learner in the classroom and there's not enough support to go around because the teacher who supports that is helping another class right then, or there's a Zoom problem, the Zoom password doesn't work, we have to get everyone a new password and log back on, there's just technology glitches.
The grid went down today?
Yeah, it's just...
The electricity went down today.
It's this is insane, and our kids are getting screwed by this, and we have to get back to in-person learning, number one, and number two, we need the whole community to be mobilized around a response for this. Everyone who can help with providing a learning pod space for parents who need to drop kids off, everyone who can help mobilize around food distribution to families who are not able to come and pick it up. This is a citywide emergency. We need a citywide response. I mean, this can't be LPS's response, problem alone to solve, because the issues all the racial disparities and the unfairness of this that COVID has made so clear are, we're watching that play out right before our eyes now. So we have to do something, we all have to come together and do something about this.
Mayor Rivera?
Just a piece of information. What's the worst attendance day that you can recall we had last year, kids going to school? Across the district, the total number of kids that didn't show up to school. I gotta think it's around Christmas or something like that, just number of kids that didn't show up.
Yeah, you're right. It's usually the days right before a break. We have very low attendance.
50%?
Yeah, in the 60s.
How about a day that's not next to a holiday? That's pretty big. You ever have more than 500 students out in a day?
It's possible, but I don't recall.
I'm trying to juxtapose this 1,200 students, and again, we know that there's 13,479 enrolled. We know you had one 91% day. And so, if that's true, we're talking about 1,200 kids. And I'm pretty sure if that persists, that we would probably set ourselves on fire. We'd freak out about it. And I just want to freak out about it now before it persists.
Yes.
And frankly, I just don't know that DESI's gonna have the patience with us. You know, I think that they're gonna, the unfortunate thing, the difference between us and Lynn, or us and Brockton, or Springfield is they kind of are in charge here. So I would be very concerned, what they would want to do about something of this magnitude. I'd like to do something sooner than later, and so if we could figure out a plan for this 1,200, you want to call it 1,000, even 750, I think that that's crucial. I think it's the most important thing before this district.
Julia, did you have a?
I do.
Okay.
I do. You're all set, Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Following up on both the questions that Jess and Mayor Rivera brought up, the students that are out of state, and I know, Superintendent, you said we don't know the numbers. Have we determined why they, even though they're out of state, let's say that they're out of state because they cannot travel at this point because of COVID. Have we determined that they're not able to connect to take online classes? Is that allowed, even though they're out of the state, but they're temporarily out because of whatever reason?
We're not advertising it that you can be in another state and still
Right,
be
no,
enrolled with us.
not at all, and I'm not.
But we're
I'm
also not
saying-
disallowing it because we do believe our students will come back and that families have made very difficult decisions to send their students to another caretaker full-time. So we empathize. If you had to send your students somewhere full-time, that's because you had no choice.
So, and these students were some of the ones that were also provided, I'm assuming, with their computers or laptops when we first had the situation with the pandemic. Which means that they would be able to connect, is what I'm saying.
Well, back in the spring, we made that the priority, and then over the summer. We do not know over the summer which one of these students got the devices or not. We have plenty of them who've come back because there were issues with the spring Chromebooks and devices, for sure. And the other thing you should know is we actually gave out hotspots, and they're active in the DR. We have active hotspots in the DR. So we didn't disallow it, but, now we've got a device all the way on the island.
Which brings me to the same discussion in terms of, once we determine the number of students that are out of state or out of the country, and the reasons for them being there because of a caretaker or a family situation, if we can still provide them with the necessary instructions. And I think this is where those numbers come in that the mayor was asking about before. And the other one is, you mentioned a lot of children, pre-K children that are going to a daycare. Is it possible that we might be able to identify those daycare centers to assist them the same way that the Y or the Boys and Girls Club or some of these other groups are assisting to help these daycare providers help the kids log in so that they can then be serviced?
Yeah, with the daycare provider is not an issue of willingness, it's a wish of capacity. As you know, small daycare providers may have 10 children, which can include infant and toddlers, and now a school-aged child. So what we've learned is that it's not that they don't want to, it's they simply physically cannot help that younger student log on. One, because their fluency with the device and Zoom and everything else is limited, and two, they're caring for younger students and younger children. So it's not they don't want to, they really physically cannot.
But then, as Jess was saying, then this is something that we should all come together and figure out ways that these centers that already have the students there can be assisted somehow. A lot of the daycare centers here, even though they're small, they belong to some type of circuit, the child care circuit that provides them with certain assistances that they might need.
TCG runs that.
So maybe reaching out to them and seeing how they can assist the school district so that these daycare providers can assist, you know, the LPS. Especially because it's also a big help to the daycare providers.
Yeah,
If they're able to have the kids log on, they're being, in a sense, the kids are being taken care of by being taught that the daycare provider does not have to do that for them.
Yeah, TCG is an exceptional partner, and we have trained them, and they're working with us. In fact, they currently have 150 students enrolled in one of their programs. We've now offered them more space so they can come up to at least 400. They're an exceptional. They're exactly what we need as a partner, and I can't say enough good things about them. They said, we presented the same issue we've shared with you. They said, we can do it if you give them more space, and guess what? We're finding more space. Because they don't have the physical space, but we've trained them. They know exactly what to do with our students. So is the Boys and Girls Club. So those bigger partners are exceptional at helping us. And our kids are there. I'm talking about small, la tía, la abuela, la vecina daycares. Those are the ones that are much harder, Julia, porque tienen 8 more kids and 2 babies. It's not possible for them to help my 5-year-old. You see the problem? Mm-hmm. And also, they're not fluent in it, and when we say, I can teach you, they're like, no, I don't, I don't have time for that. I'm trying to feed a baby, I'm trying to take care of the toddler, so that's the challenge. It's not the bigger ones. They're perfect. They're excellent at this. It's the single mom and pop family daycare, which we love and adore, which our families trust. That's the challenge.
Is there, I think also based on these discussions that we're having, it would be a lot more beneficial to us if instead of giving us percentages, you provide us with exact numbers for the next coming meetings in the different categories. This way it's easier for us to digest that information and it's more specific, I think for our purposes anyways.
Great. Are there other things, Superintendent, that you want to report on?
Just wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything. Nope.
Okay. I don't even know where this analogy or this saying, beat a dead horse, that's a horrible visual, so I don't want to say it. I don't want to go back and like say things, but I just underscoring, I think, some of the themes and some of the things that I've heard from board members. One is that, again, we were able to account for about 89% of students with regards to technology needs, Wi-Fi, all things like that. It sounds to me like the district has then been able to account for, if not all, the majority of kids who weren't originally in that 89%. And I think what the board is asking for then is that information broken down both by percent, but by number specifically. And it sounds like the district has a good handle on, X number of those kids we've talked to are in daycares or in overseas or whatever. So I think I'm just hearing the board wanting to have that information. I'm also hearing, and I guess I'm just very interested, and I don't know what the next step is on this, on some of these issues that have been identified that, as Jess has said, really require like a broader community response. And I guess I'm just saying, I want to be a part of that. I don't know exactly, how we do that and which sort of situations are going to be ones that we want to elevate. So, for example, if it's the single, daycare provider, and we want to figure out how to support those students, or if it's something else, or, again, like the students who are in high school and are working, they're the breadwinners right now for their families, and we know that because we accounted for them, but we know that, that's real. I just want to offer from my just personal perspective, and I think what I'm hearing from the board as well is that, we want to be a part of, not only with the district, but just more broadly with the community and mayor with the city, to be able to tackle some of those issues that are just larger, even beyond just the schools. So I'm just hearing that as a clear theme as well. Mayor?
Yeah, and that's a great example, right? I don't know the problem until we heard it tonight about the small group settings not being able to help students log in and be in front of the TV. We have the highest unemployment rate in the state. Not in the top 5, the highest unemployment in the state. I can literally put people onto work tomorrow on COVID funds that we got for the federal government. I could put people to work to do this work. So yeah, I could, if you wanted to hire 10 people to go and visit these folks every morning and put kids in it, I could do that. Tomorrow, we could start that. To go to these small places and make sure kids are in front of the classroom. And they could, I'm not sure it's going to be effective, but we could try it. But I just, you know, you're doing it again this meeting, I think is helpful, but I did it last meeting. We have an incredible amount of resources to put the shoulder against these problems, and I think that you know, it's unfair to expect that the superintendent and her staff will do it on their own. And so, but I can't, it looks ham-fisted and inappropriate for me to force myself into the conversation, and I'm not really sure I have the authority to do so. And so I don't want to violate the superintendent's contract or state law. But, you know, we got to find 1,000 kids. And we got to make sure they got a Wi-Fi and a device, and for those kids we can help cross the finish line to make that number less, we should spend the money on it. But I can't force myself into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a minimum, and this might be a small place to start, but we need to, you know, sort of request the agenda for the next nonprofit coordinating working group, and we need to lay out, like, here's the top 3 challenges that LPS is facing. How can we mobilize the resources of the nonprofit community to help solve this? Like, and that's not going to solve everything, right? But to give you an example, like at LCW with Movement City, we've been agonizing about, you know, how we implement the after-school programming, and we're doing a remote model of it, and it's modified, and it's this and that. But if it's more useful to the kids of our city to switch and direct our whole Movement City budget and all of our resources towards supporting in some way the remote learning and getting that 1,200 number down and improving the experience for the ones who are going, then let's talk about that. Let's do that, because this is not, it's not like we can't just mess around. Like, we all have to mobilize on this and solve this problem together. And I think there are other youth programs, and like, I know the big ones are doing an amazing job, the Boys and Girls Club and the YM, and we've been talking to them to figure out how they're doing it and so on, but there's a lot of, you know, sort of smaller or mid-level ones that could also help out with facilities and staff and resources, and we all need to pivot and redirect that stuff towards solving this problem. And I know that, like, that, maybe that's a drop in the bucket, but like, let's get 100 drops in the bucket, and then we're at least, like, you know, we're reducing the level in the bucket, and let's figure out other things to do. Like the mayor said, he has resources he could direct towards additional staffing to either, like, to do the family engagement necessary to figure out what the barriers people have are, and figure out how we can, you know, make this situation better. And I know there's going to be cases where we just can't solve the family's problem, and it's just going to be horrible, but I think we can do more together.
Yeah, and if I could, Superintendent, again, like, it sounds to me like we know what the sort of situations with kids are, and you've talked about, you know, some of those. I guess I just wonder, maybe to recap, like, to this question of, for the students who maybe aren't attending, or, and again, it sounds like we have a good handle on why they're not attending. What would you name, just again, as some of the reasons that you're seeing? Like, I know the daycare issue is one that, again, like, just understanding, it makes sense. Like, there are kids who are young, the parent wants a daycare spot because they know they can send the kid there every day, so they don't want to give that up, yet that daycare can't necessarily help them get online, and so that seems like it's a certain percentage of our kids or number of kids that we want to know what that is, but that seems like one. Can you just reiterate, like, what are some other areas like that that you're seeing that are really proving barriers for kids attending right now? And I know it's only been a week, but it's been a week, you know what I mean? So, like, what are some of the other barriers you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the teachers, as I said earlier, and administrators are doing an excellent job of pinning down every single kid, why, and these home visits that I mentioned. You know, we've had students, as I mentioned earlier, who no longer live at the address that is listed, new number. Now we've got to talk to the neighbor of the neighbor and that kind of thing, right? We're tracking them down via other sources. And I also mentioned the example of the high school students who are now working, unfortunately. Like, you know, the example I have more recent is in my superintendent cabinet group, one of the students who is part of that group was taking the Zoom call in a closet. And 40 minutes into the call, she goes, I gotta go, my break is over. So she was very interested, right, and wants to be part of this, but also was working. So imagine that student when she logs on and off, if she's at work, I don't know how she's even managing that. I don't know, and so attendance doesn't count for her, and it's recorded and it's represented in this number, right? So it's hard to say where it's skewed. I'm certainly going to come back to you and give you the breakdown as best as possible to figure out where it lands more. And if that can change and pivot very easily by the next time we meet also, right? But I'm giving you live data as I've talked to teachers, as I've talked to the administrators, and they're sharing what they've learned.
Yeah, and I think with the students not at their address, I mean, it sounds like teachers are calling, we have attendance officers, like, so there seems to be a lot of resources there.
Home visits,
like, to track, you know, where kids are, which is great. And with the daycare issue, again, like, it's a complex issue, and I'm hearing some ideas, you know, Jess and maybe others on, you know, ways to at least tackle it, and so, and also with students working, I mean, this is a big challenge, like, not just here in Lawrence, but across the Commonwealth, and thinking about, like, what can we do? And the we here, I think, is the district, the city, I'll say us as a state, like, we know this is an issue, and so we got to come up with a plan so that the student, you know, doesn't have to take her call from a closet, you know what I'm saying, for 40 minutes and then go back to work. I know she has to work.
She was at work.
It's real, she has to
had her
work.
uniform on, she goes, I gotta log off. We thanked her profusely. Oh my gosh, she goes, I gotta run, that my break is over. It was her lunch break, right? So she's made every effort she can, and she cannot miss work.
Right.
That's a live example.
So, and I guess the point, I think what I'm hearing as well from the board is, and it's not just tonight, but I mean, just to reiterate, like, these are complicated issues. We want to be a part of the solution. I think as a board, and it sounds like obviously there are resources with the different roles that we play, you know, be it in our day jobs or, you know, just other things. And so I think to the degree, like either with the daycare issue or the students working, if there's specific concrete things that we can help with, you know, we just, what I'm hearing is we really want to know, like, we want to be a part of the solution. And right now it seems like it's a school issue because that's what we're talking about, but these are clearly larger issues than the school. And so I'm not even looking at you, Superintendent, like you have all the answers, so tell us, but I think I'm just trying to express that what I'm hearing from myself and the board is that these are large issues that require, as Jess said, you know, sort of community-wide, citywide, and I would argue statewide intervention. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like right now, I know we're talking with the schools, and so we're saying whatever you need or sort of what would be helpful. And I think obviously connecting with the mayor, I mean, which I know you do, and I think will be critically important. But I also just please, you know, I'd say reach out to me as my role as chair and as my day job, you know, as well, to think about like what can we do, what can we do to help Lawrence address these issues that are preventing our kids from engaging every day. And again, I want to underscore, it sounds to me, and we'll see the data, but it sounds to me like we know where kids are. Like I'm not actually, I'm leaving here and I'll look at the information once you present it to us, but even if we know where they are, like these issues are still preventing them from engaging, and that, you know, we just have to do something about this. Mayor?
I just want to make, I don't think we know where they are. I don't want that to get lost in that thing. I think that we know where some of them are and why they're not in, But, the ones that are the ones that we know the telltale stories of the ones that, and the anecdotes you're providing, can't be a majority of 1,200 students. So I just don't want it to be said at end of conversation where we know where they are. As I sit here today, the information was presented to me by the superintendent. I cannot deduce that we know where they all are. I know that we know where that 91% of them can be, but the long tail that I've been talking about for 4 meetings now, I think is eluding us. And so I just want to make sure that when I'm on the record, I don't believe that we do know where all the kids are.
Pat?
Yes, Ventura, I was just thinking, and I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight, and I just want to reiterate, I would have to come in on crutches, and it wouldn't be the best thing for me at this point. But we talked about the high school kids, and the problem that they have to work. Why can't we hire those high school kids after school hours to do some of the outreach for us? If we could negotiate with them that they attend their classes during the day and then use them as a workforce after school to make home visits, to contact these families, maybe to do some troubleshooting with the computers, and let's pay them. There must be funds that are available, Mayor. Do we have any funds? I know you're putting your hands up in the air. Well, you're offering funds. I mean, here's an idea. Let's use a workforce that we have on hand and let's get them back to school. And I think it's a win-win.
Find that girl who was in the closet, and I'll put her to work.
I'm sorry?
Find that girl who was in the closet, and I'll put her to work. And I'll pay her $15 an hour. You want to do that with all the kids? I'll do it with all the kids that are high school students. I'm in. That's a great idea.
It is. It is a great idea.
It's like work study.
Yes.
But you got to log in during the daytime.
Yes.
Right, right.
Let's do that.
But thank you, Pat. That was also going to be my comment, based on the comment that the mayor made before in terms of having funds for us to be able to provide some type of funding. If we have some of these kids that are only working part-time right now or working in a temporary job, that the city could hire them to be able to help. And even go to, if they need to take their classes and they can't come in, they can even go to some of these small daycare providers and help with the little ones in terms of logging on and making sure that they're on, and they can do their classes right from there. I mean, I don't know what the environment would be like, but just a thought of something that could work. Because I'm sure a lot of those kids also are probably unemployed right now, because most of them work in, coffee shops or restaurants or stores, and most of those places are closed. So this would be a great way of helping out and getting help for the LPS community as well.
And I know it's not that easy. I mean, you have to, we're insured and we have to do applications, and
Yeah.
it's got to be a safe working environment. All those things can be addressed.
But the fact that they're working means that they're old enough to be able to work at this point.
Okay, any other questions or comments for the board, for the superintendent?
One more, Ventura.
Please, Pat, go ahead.
Do we have daycares using our buildings currently?
We do not, with the exception of TCG, who is one of our partners and will be housed in our buildings.
All right.
And they're
It's too bad
childcare
we-
provider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
so, it works for an organization like TCG because they're able to pull permits, they have enough staff, et cetera, et cetera.
All
Great.
right, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Is that the end of your report? Okay, great. Dave, if you don't mind putting up the PowerPoint that I sent you earlier. So the next item on the agenda is, once I pull it up, is the chair's report. And for my report, I wanted to bring back to us the 2019-2020 Superintendent's Evaluation Update and just kind of lay out the steps of the process that we'll need to take to finish out the evaluation, the superintendent's evaluation for this past school year. We will then, once we finish it, go through a similar process that we did last year to set goals and, sort of launch the process for this current school year. Dave, you can actually advance it 2 slides. Okay, so this is just a reminder of what we voted on as a board in terms of the evaluation cycle for the superintendent. So last December, January, she completed a self-assessment and created her plans and goals and presented them to us in February. We voted then to accept those goals and knew that she was working on them. She implemented, and then we did receive a mid-cycle goals review in June at our June meeting from the superintendent. And again, it's just mid-cycle. And based on the 9-month evaluation cycle that we approved, now in September is where we're at for the summative stage. So this is now, sort of end of year. Dave, you can actually go 2 slides forward. I don't need all these slides. So basically, this lays out sort of what the summative evaluation will look like. So tonight, I'm just reviewing this process with you, and then we'll be getting your input on the particular information that you're going to want to see when the superintendent is presenting her end-of-year summary. At our October 7th meeting, and again, this assumes that we're meeting every 2 weeks. I know that we are, been meeting monthly for sort of most of the history of this board, but given the just current, situation that we're in, it feels like every other week, it feels more appropriate right now. So this is assuming that. So that means that at our next board meeting, the superintendent submits an end-of-year summary to the board, and she'll, both submit it and then present it here to the board. After that, the board, I will send to you all a template that you all will fill out individually, and you'll complete by November 4th. And this basically allows, gives you time to review the evidence and the report prepared by the superintendent, and then you're going to each do your own draft summative evaluation, similar to what we did last year, and then you send it to me, and my job is to then, similar to what John did, then compile it into one report that I'll share with all of you, and then we vote on our November 18th meeting to, on the final summative evaluation. So that's sort of the process here. This next slide is just a reminder of the standards that form part of the evaluation. So we have instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, professional culture, and the superintendent has put goals, related to these. And then if you click one more time, Dave, these are just some of the evidence that we would be using to determine what our summative evaluation would be. So there's products of practice, so there's data, artifacts, multiple measures of student learning, and then other evidence, again, related to the standards. So this slide here, and I will send this to all of you and sort of write out the process, but I just want to introduce it to you tonight. This shouldn't be new. These are the goals that the superintendent presented to us this year. And I know some of these, obviously since March we've had, with COVID, I mean, it's put some things, it's paused some things and accelerated other things. So knowledgeable of that, but we are still using the goals that the superintendent laid forward. And so when you see these goals, I guess what I'd love your feedback on both now, and then I'll follow up in an email and ask for you to provide feedback as well, is as you think about what you're going to need to be able to do an end-of-year summative evaluation, what kind of information are you going to want to see from the superintendent in order for you to be able to make that summative evaluation? So what kind of data points, just what information are you going to want to be able to evaluate, again, like the degree to which you feel like the superintendent has met these goals. So again, goal 1 is about open architecture vision through renewed turnaround plan and creation of an autonomy framework. So again, work has happened this year around that, but what kind of information would you all want to see and need to see in order to make an evaluation of that? So I'm happy to spend a few minutes talking about this now if there are things that already come to mind. If not, like I said, I'll email this to everyone and just lay out a process for you to be able to say the kind of information you would want and need. And we'd like to do that before the next meeting so that the superintendent is then ready to come back to us, sharing her end-of-year summary, inclusive of the data points and the information that we've asked for as a board in order to help us with our evaluation. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions or comments.
Can you go back to the schedule?
Sure, Dave, can you go back to the, keep going, sorry. There, sorry, that.
I'm all set.
I feel like the COVID situation has obviously deeply impacted the ability to achieve some of these goals. So how do we fairly evaluate the superintendent when there's been restrictions that are completely out of her control on some of these things? Is there some process for noting that, or how do you change the ratings? Like, for instance, the turnaround renewal, right? Like, that whole process got halted because just as the community participation and school participation part was about to kick off, COVID shut all of that down. And that's been, pushed into the fall. So you can't give someone high marks for that, but you also can't give them low marks for that. Like,
Right.
So how do we do that? How do we evaluate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at our next meeting, in addition to the superintendent presenting her end of year, we'll also share the template, that we're going to all be sort of filling out. There will be, and this is the same template we used last year, so there are sort of criteria that you mark, but then there's also the comment section, that we'd put in there. And I think your point is that, yeah, we have to look at all the information and what happened, and the superintendent in the goals update, both at the beginning of the year and in the mid-year, laid out for each goal, like there were certain benchmarks, right, that she wanted to meet. And so I think we're going to have to look at that and say, okay, which benchmarks were met, which ones were not, and if they weren't met, is it because, situations beyond the control of the superintendent, were there other reasons? So we can take all that into account. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our judgment and evaluation based on the evidence we have of these goals, and quite frankly, there are going to be some of them, as you've pointed out, where I think there will still be things that we can point to that happened related to the goal, even if, the turnaround plan was completely renewed, like has not happened. But I think we can still point to evidence that, certain parts or phrases were done. So, we're going to have to use the evidence that's available to us, and I think we're going to have to use just the context that we're in when we're making this final evaluation.
Okay. I think a good idea might be to also to, when the superintendent presents her goals, is to have something similar to what we have with the budget, where we list the original goals, especially with the turnaround plan, what the original goals were, then the goals that were achieved for the following year, and then where we are now. Maybe 3 columns which would show, before, after, and where we are currently. That might be helpful. That way we don't have to keep going back and forth and asking, okay, so where were we when we started with the turnaround plan, for instance. It might be a little bit more work, but I'm sure all of that is already somewhere in a computer that can be easily put into a presentation or provided to us in order to facilitate us into whatever comments, areas where we need to make based on what has been accomplished. And as Jess says, based on the circumstances as to why some of them have not been accomplished so far.
Mayor?
This seems to me like something that we may want to talk to Desi about, whether or not we get some dispensation on, like, I think they grade pilots after they've landed the plane. And so like, I think it's weird that the superintendent's gonna be taken away from duties, teaching and learning and making sure for us to accommodate this rule. It just feels weird. Am I the only one that feels that?
I'm sorry.
It feels weird. That we're gonna take time out of the important things that are before us to do this, not because we don't wanna do it, but it makes it so hard to get this thing done. Given all the caveats that have already been said, is that something we wanna talk to Desi about? Because it's contractual, but it's also mandated by law, right? I mean, we gotta do this. Or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, no, we do have to do an evaluation, and this was our board's vote to sort of set this timeline, and obviously the world changed, since we set this vote. I guess when I look at the goals that were presented to us in June, and again, this is just from my seat, like, in some ways, I would say, and Superintendent, I want to speak for you, so please, but like, it would be nice to bring some closure to last year with regards to this, because there are new goals that the superintendent, things that she's working on right now and will want her to work on to focus on. When I look at the things that were set, the superintendent set as her goals and the key actions and benchmarks, I actually think a lot of them happened, just going back to what was sent for us in June. So, and again, I let me just say from the front, and I'll defer to the superintendent, and because I don't want to take you away from the critical work you're doing, but it also feels like most of the work is going to be on us as board members in between a couple of meetings, just to do like the evaluation, and then I'll compile it and put it all together. But again, from my vantage point, and again, Superintendent, I'd love to hear your voice on this. I think it'd be nice to get some closure, and at least from what I'm seeing, I don't think it's going to be a huge lift, just given that, I think there's clear evidence just looking at some of these key actions that they've been met.
Yeah, we talked about this in June, and I highlighted several key action steps that were in fact accomplished by then. I think to Jess's point, there were some that were halted, but significant progress was made. I'm just looking again here, I have my notes from that document. And then for obvious reasons, some of it wasn't completed, but I would say the great majority of it was, and when I update it, it'll be clear which ones were left behind based on, the circumstances, the current context. And I think to your point, I'd like to start new goals, so I don't know how to do that if we don't close this chapter out, because there's other things that we need to focus on specifically with this reopening and other things that you all have highlighted that need attention. So I don't know how to start that new process. It's happening, but more concretely so that we can talk about it in a more in a way that's recorded, and you all and I can have that conversation, and more formally, that is. So it's up to you all, but
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is, again, based on the June document, like, you gave us your goals and sort of an update. I would be prepared for you to come in next week, talk about just where you're at, with all of these, and I think to the mayor's point, I mean, I think you have to balance that with everything else that you're being asked to do right now for the district. And I do think it's important to revisit them and close these out. And again, the work will actually be more on us to do the forms and compile them and things like that. But I would say, I think it will be important to get some closure. Use your discretion just in terms of how much time and, especially since you already gave us an update. And then we can ask questions in the meeting itself and, sort of get clarity. But what I would say to the board is I will send you all, not only this PowerPoint, but we can forward back again the goals and the June update, just so people have it. And if there are things that you would like evidence specifically or data points and things like that, I would say, email the superintendent and copy me just so she's prepared for that. But I can put this all in an email, or just sort of laying out next steps for this. Any other questions or comments? Sorry, my glasses, I keep them off and then I can't see. Okay, so the final then item is to vote on the minutes of our last meeting, September 9th, 2020. So at this point, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion?
Can we just we just want to have 1 minute to sort of clarify that whole discussion we had about the August 5th and 12th minutes and the vote on the reopening plan, and we can do that after this. And then I also had a totally separate comment.
Okay.
or request.
Well, I guess what I would ask is, are we ready to vote on the minutes, or are the discussion on these
I'm-
minutes that were sent out?
I'm ready to vote on these minutes are fine,
Okay.
I think.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call vote. So
Yeah.
Jess,
Yes.
Noemi is not present. Pat,
Yes,
Mayor Rivera, Julia,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so the minutes pass. So I'll now open it up to any final business or matters that board members have. Jess?
Okay. So before we get into that other minutes thing, I just want to say, can we have, for the next several meetings as we go throughout the fall, I'd like to request that we have sort of a standing items that are part of the superintendent's report to us, right? So I want to continue to hear about the accommodations, how many have been requested, how many have been denied, how many are pending, et cetera. I'd like to hear next time about what our progress is on understanding how many of the sort of high needs category folks are going to actually choose to send their kids in person, and do we have enough teachers who are ready and willing to come in and teach on the in-person or hybrid model, and what the progress is on kind of matching those needs with those teachers. And I just think that needs to be a kind of a standing thing, because we need to understand that over the next several months. I think facilities, you already have a regular update on those. And then the attendance issue, I definitely think we need to hear about that regularly. And then we need to hear about the breakdown of the sort of missing 1,200, a little more detailed data on what we know about them, and then what some of the strategies that we're doing to address that. And I do want to reiterate, I hope that it's understood and it's being heard as I, for one, am not asking this out of any malice or punitive desire to I think it's just a huge problem, and we really need to know what's going on. And I just want to reiterate that this is not just the school's problem, and the schools cannot solve it alone. But we need to keep hearing about what's going on so we understand the extent of the challenges and are figuring out what other resources we can mobilize to solve it. Because the schools are already doing a yeoman's job, and they cannot solve it alone.
Great. And Jesse, did you say you had something else?
I do.
Was that it?
Yeah,
Julio?
then I just want to clarify the minutes thing.
Okay.
But do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, just go ahead,
Oh,
since we're-
okay.
yeah.
So just what I want to say is that we had a lot of back and forth last time, and I was like, well, wait, did I read things correctly and so on? And I think I just want to clarify that in my particular case, what I think happened was we had a lot of discussion at the August 5th meeting about the draft reopening plan. And in that plan, on August 5th, it was not stated explicitly that teachers were going to be somewhat mandated to teach from their classrooms. When the plan came before us for a vote on August 12th, that sentence was in fact in there on that plan that we voted on, but it wasn't explicitly called out to us. And so it's my bad for not reading the final plan more carefully and calling attention to it at that point. But that is why we have had a lot of this, because I think if we had realized it at that point, we would not have voted to approve that, because we would have felt that there needed to be much more flexibility and leniency around the remote accommodation. So I just want to request in the future, when there's an explicit difference between the draft that we see and then the final that we're discussing, I know I'm not disowning my own responsibility for reading carefully, but I would appreciate administration bringing to our attention any explicit differences between draft documents that we're reading from week to week. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Great, and sorry, Julio, did you have something?
Yes, I just want to bring up a couple of issues. I had sent an email to the superintendent prior to this meeting, and she doesn't need to address those questions, but I would like for her to be able to respond to them via email and respond to all of us. I chose to send them individually, not to break the open meeting law. However, these are important questions that I have and that I think some of us on this board also have, and that concern some of the staff and the teaching people at the district. So I would like to have those answered when she has an opportunity to do that. But there are two other things. One of the requests that I made was to have the LTU representative address this board tonight and the audience in regards to the MOU that the union and the school reached, the agreement that was reached, just for the benefit of everybody that is not here, but also because we're getting the report from the superintendent, which I trust, but I'd like to hear from the union rep and get her feeling for what went on in terms of reaching that agreement. And the last item that I'd like to bring up is an email that we received from Pavel Payano regarding a meeting for us to discuss to speak on regards to the school safety guidelines at a given time when they request a meeting. And I feel that this meeting should probably be attended by the superintendent and perhaps the board chair, the chairman of the board on behalf of the board, because you'd have a better handle on answering any questions that they might have. So those are the items that I have.
Thank you, and yeah, definitely on the safety one, we'll follow up and get more information, but I think it makes sense. Yeah, the superintendent will have the information. I'm happy to attend on behalf of the board as well, but Mayor, I'm not sure if you have more info on that.
No, I have a different question.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Do you know when we will have another member of the board, of the alliance?
I currently do not, so we need to get clarity on that, and I'm happy to also try to get clarity on that from the commissioner.
Because it's an even number.
Correct.
Is it possible to have the union representative?
Yeah, I was actually going to turn right now and put her on the spot, maybe. Kim, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say at this time, or? No? Okay.
So the fact that she doesn't want to speak to us is because she's totally in agreement with everything that went on in reaching the agreement with the district?
I can't, I'm not sure. I
Right,
don't want
I
to put
know
her on
you
the spot.
can,
It's
but
her
I'm,
right to
but I'm
speak. and-
openly
Right.
asking the question. She doesn't need to answer, but I'm asking the question because it is my understanding that an agreement was reached and that everybody is happy with that agreement. So by her not being able to address this, I'm taking that as a yes, that everybody is happy with that agreement.
Yeah, and the body ratified it. So, yeah, they're,
And the other item that I want to say is I want to thank all the teachers, all the parents, and everybody who has reached out to us with their concerns. We are listening. We are reading all of your letters. There are too many of them, so unfortunately, you probably will not be getting responses from all of us, but we are very much aware of what is going on, and we are trying our best to work with everybody and get everything done for the benefit of our school children. I just want you to know that we are very much aware, and we thank you. And please continue to let us know your thoughts on things that are happening so that we can continue to have open discussions and hopefully be able to come to some conclusion that benefits all of us.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Jess?
Yep.
Noemi's absent. Pat?
Yes.
Mayor Rivera? Julia?
Yes?
And the chair votes yes, so we are now adjourned. Thank you.